Good evening.
Good evening. You're kind of blurry, Miss Williams.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Shay, did you give me an agenda for tonight?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Dr. Copeland?
Did you give me an agenda for tonight?
There is an agenda for tonight, yes. If you all would go to your email and it would
Oh,
be
I see
coming
it.
from Diligent Community.
I see.
You
I
see it?
see.
Okay. Give me 1 second. We're still trying to get the live stream together. I apologize, but Ishmael is helping me. Okay. Okay. It still won't let me save it.
Hmm. Okay, I had to get. Mhm. Okay, I'm gonna do something different here. I'm gonna have to go into the meeting this way. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We are having a little bit of a technical challenge, but we'll make it. I need to. Okay. All right, Dr. Coleman, it's 7:01 p.m.
Okay, I'm looking to just. Okay. Here we go. Shay, may I have a roll call vote to establish a forum, please?
Yes, Ms. Lane? You're muted, Ms. Lane. Ms. Williams?
Present.
Hopefully I'm not muted now. Am I
Thank you. You're
Mhm.
good. Dr. Vi Elliott?
Present.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Mauriel?
Present.
Ms. Sharon Chisworth on here?
Mm.
Okay. And Dr. Coleman?
Yes, present. Thank
Dr.
you.
Coleman, I can share my screen if you like.
Oh, I have two screens here, so you're talking about the agenda?
Yes, ma'am. For everyone
Yes.
else that's on here, I can share my
Oh,
screen.
please, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, at this time, Ms. Real, are you able to see the norms, Ms. Real?
Ms. Morrow, you're muted.
That I was muted. Yeah, I see them.
Okay,
Okay. So our board norms under number one, cohesive team. We pause to hear all voices after someone speaks. We consider all opinions. We assume positive intentions. Under item two, collective agreement. We good grief, collective voices to reach decisions, honor and respect the work of the board, honoring and supporting the board decision at all times. Under number three, be prepared for meetings. The board will review the packet details and submit questions within the established time frame. Members of the board will arrive 5 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Can you bring it up, take it down a little further for me? Okay, thank you. Okay, wait a minute, let me see. Members of the board, yeah, I got that part. Members of the board will arrive 5 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Administration will release board packets to the Riverview Gardens Board of Education within the identified time frame. And under category number 4, not allowed outside entities to dictate board actions. Riverview Gardens School Board of Education decisions will be made based on facts, policies, and procedures, not individuals' opinions or requests. And number 2, educate and encourage the community to follow proper protocol for voicing concerns. And that's policy KC, community engagement. Those are our board norms.
thank you. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second, Dr. May.
It's been moved by Ms. Williams and second by Dr. May to approve the agenda as presented. Roll call vote, please, Shay.
Okay, I was trying to unmute myself. Ms. Morreal,
Yes.
Ms. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Von Elliott,
Yes.
Ms. Tisworth, Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Williams, and Dr. Coleman.
Yes. Thank you, Shay. Now we're ready to move into the items for discussion. Dr. Patton.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, board members. Thank you all for being here tonight as well. As you know, this evening is to get a good feel for our budget and where we are. So that's why I wanted to plan a work session, planning session with the board work session. And so in order to facilitate and discuss a thorough conversation, Mr. Charles and I will be presenting information relative to our current budget, where we are, a 3-year projection of where we will be, and then looking at some board reductions. I do want to stress that this is the first round of board reductions. There may be others, but we wanted to make sure that the board members had a thorough understanding of our budget before we ask them to approve a budget reduction plan. So at this time, I'm going to ask Shay to pull up the PowerPoint presentation. And Mr. Charles, if you will come off mute and begin to go through the PowerPoint just to give that one. Thank you, Shay.
Good. Good evening, everyone. Like Dr. Patton said, we want to talk about the budget a little bit, and we've discussed a lot of this already in the last few months, but we're going to really, I guess, be a little more detailed, a little more blunt about where we stand, how we got here, and where we're going. Shay, I don't know if Shay, if, is there a way to run that, or is this all we're going to be able to see? I guess this is it. That's right. We'll make this work. So yeah, we're going to talk about our current financial status. We're going to talk about how we got here and where we're going. But when we talk about where we're going, we're going to talk about two paths. One path would be our current path if we just continue to do what we've been doing. The other path is actually the path we must take, which is the path of making changes. And we'll even talk about some potential changes that we may be asking the board to consider as we move forward. So when we talk about our current financial status, again, some of this stuff's going to be repetitive, but I want to make sure we're all starting from the same place. You'll remember that our accounting maintains four funds. One of those funds, and the easiest one to deal with really, is the debt service fund. That's the fund that makes the principal and interest payments on our bonds. This fund operates independent of all the other funds. And currently, our debt service balance is healthy. We don't need to make any changes. So we know the debt service fund is fine. We don't need to really discuss that at any length. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the capital fund. You'll remember that the voters passed Proposition S, and Riverview Garden School District sold bonds and deposited the proceeds of those bonds at the end of the 23-24 school year. So it was just June of last year. So all of the revenue hit during 23-24, but all of the expenditure of those monies will occur this year, 24-25, and next year, and the year after that. So this Prop S money makes it a little bit difficult when you're looking at the budget, because if you only look at the total fund balances all combined, well, all the revenue came in one year, but all this Prop S expenditure is going out over the course of 3 years, and it really skews our vision of where we stand. But when we talk about capital fund, as we move forward, we want to remember that we do have capital expenditures in addition to our Prop S construction. We have our normal repairs and maintenance. We need to buy equipment sometimes, computers, whatever that might be. And our long-range budget planning takes that into account. In fact, the long-range planning assumes we're going to try to maintain about $250,000 in the capital fund for unforeseen instances and so on. If ever there were a significant unexpected event and we needed more capital money than that, we can easily transfer money from the general fund into the capital fund. It would just be something we'd bring to the board and ask the board to approve. So the capital fund really isn't our issue. The issue is on the next slide, which is our operating fund. Now, when we say operating fund, we're really talking about the other two funds combined, the general fund and the teachers fund. You may remember the teachers fund pays all salaries and benefits from certified staff, teachers, administrators, anybody that holds a teaching certificate. The general fund pays all the salaries and benefits of the non-certified staff and pays for all of our supplies, materials, purchase services, and so on. Basically, these two funds combined, this is the money we use to operate the district on a day-to-day basis all year long. So that's the name operating fund. What we have noticed is our expenditures in the operating fund increased dramatically over the last 3 years. Now, even though that happened, our balances seemed acceptable because of all the ESSER funding we were receiving. In fact, at the end of the 22-23 school year, our operating fund showed a balance of over $31 million, which was roughly a 45% fund balance. And part of that was due to the fact that we took in over $13 million in ESSER funding that year. Then in 23-24, which was last year, we finished again with a little over $31 million, which was about a 37% fund balance. And again, that was due in large part to over $18 million in ESSER funding received that year. But when we look at this year, could you scroll up just a little bit, Shay? On 24-25, the original budget that was shared with the board last June, the first one you approved, suggested that we would end this year again with about 31 million in the operating fund, or about a 40% fund balance. And that anticipated about 9 million in ESSER revenue. This fall, when I came on board and we started to dig into this a little bit, we realized that that original budget was not accurate. It just wasn't. We brought a revision to the board in October and a second budget revision in January. And our estimate right now is that our operating fund really will close the year closer to $16 million, which is a little over 18%. And that's including the $8 million, the last $8 million of ESSER funding we actually have received this year. So to put all that in a nutshell, our operating fund balance is going to drop by $15 million this year, even with the $8 million in ESSER funding that we're receiving. So what this means is we look to the future, and that future has no ESSER funding in it. We have a $23 million problem. If we don't do anything, we're going to spend $23 million more every year than we take into the operating fund. Let me repeat that. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to spend $23 million more than we take in the operating fund every year. So that is a real good picture of where we currently stand. I think I will pause there before I talk about how we got here, because that's the next phase. I thought I'd maybe pause to see if anybody needs any clarification on what we've covered to this point. Okay, I'll take the silence to mean that we have good stewards who have prepared, and good students, and we're prepared. Okay, so how do we get here? Well, over the last 4 years, we've received over $50 million in ESSER funding, and we became dependent on those, just plain and simple. Over the last 3 years, we added approximately 200 employees, approximately 200 positions were added. That caused us to increase what we spent on salary and wages by $15 million. That was a 49% increase. And on the benefits side, we increased expenditures there by about 5 million, which was a 48% increase. So over the last 3 years, hired 200, I guess we added 200 positions and increased our salary and benefit cost by $20 million. Now, the ESSER funding did decrease significantly this year. Didn't go away completely, but it did decrease significantly, and it will be completely eliminated for next year and all years in the future. But when I looked, there were really no long-range budget estimates prepared in the past. There was no plan for what do we do after the ESSER funds are gone. No long-range planning. In addition to that, we discovered there were errors in the budget that was brought to the board back in June of last year. Most notably, state revenue was overestimated by $5 million, and the cost of salaries and benefits was underestimated by $9 million. So if you take the fact that, hey, the original budget expected $9 million in ESSER funding, State revenue was off by 5 million, salaries and benefits off by 9, add it all up, there's your $23 million problem, just described a different way. But again, reiterates, this is how we got here, and our current challenge is that every year we're set to spend $23 million more than we bring in the operating fund. So if we go to the next slide, before we talk about next steps, again, let me pause to see if there are any comments or questions before we move ahead.
I do have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
And I'm really not trying to be funny when I ask this question. Could some of these errors that occurred be covering up embezzlement?
We looked at everything very closely. No, it was, I can describe the errors that occurred. For example, the state revenue. During COVID, the state allowed school districts throughout the state to use their attendance data from pre-COVID years. Normally, we have to use the current year, last year, or the year before. They allowed all school districts to go back further so that funding was not impacted by the lower attendance rates during the COVID pandemic. But that special consideration by the state ended, and this year we had to go back to using the original and normal method of computing state funding. That was missed in the original budget. The original budget that was presented to you continued to use pre-COVID attendance data, and that caused the state revenue estimate to be too high. On the salary side, I've gone back and double checked it, and quite honestly, there was just a whole section, a whole group of employees whose salaries and wages were missed and were not included in the budget. It's just, there's no way to put it any simpler than that. It was just a flat out error, flat out missed. So no embezzlement, just some pretty significant mistakes.
And also there was a projection that benefits would reduce this school year, and never have we seen benefits reduce. Benefits usually increase every year. So Mr. Charles is exactly right. There were just mistakes made on the budget that was put forth in June.
Yeah, and I will tell you this too. There are several people, a lot of people in the business office have been there a long time, and when we, Virgil and Tony and everybody else in the business office, and when start seeing these things, I obviously start asking questions of the staff. Hey, how did we get here? What's your knowledge of the history of this? And again, it was just mistakes. The that building deficit was growing and growing over the years, and it just didn't get addressed. It sounds like that's an oversimplification, but it's the truth. So anyway, that
I got a
is.
question.
Oh, okay.
I'm
thank you.
sorry. Did I have my hand up? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Charles, you said more than once, if we do nothing, we will be spending $23 million more than we receive. How is that possible? I mean, at some point, would there be like $0?
You're my favorite student in the class because you asked the question that leads to my next slide.
Okay.
I love it when you have the students that ask that leading question. Look at the very first bullet. If we make no changes, we will not be able to make payroll or pay our bills by about March of next year. We would be completely out of money, would be in the red in about a year's time. So you're absolutely right. And of course that would put us on the financially distressed list that DESE maintains. Anytime your fund balance drops below 3%, you become designated as financially distressed, and we would be going in the red. Now, obviously, we can't let that happen. And that's the other road, is the one we need to take, which is that changes have to be made. Um, we do have a district policy that requires Riverview Gardens School District to maintain an end of the year operating fund balance of at least 15%.
Definitely.
Yeah, which means we're going to have to reduce annual expenditures or enhance revenues somehow over the next couple of years by that $23 million. And if we want to give salary increases, wage increases, we want to account for the cost of living increases and inflation over the next several years, we're probably going to have to find more than 23 million. So it is quite a challenge. Slide on down a little bit, if you could, Shay. So where are we going? Well, let's talk about this year first of all. Dr. Patton and I worked together back in October to bring you a more accurate picture of the current year budget, and the board did approve that budget revision in October. We further refined that, and the board approved budget revision 2 in January. While all this was happening, the central services staff was meeting with principals and department heads, and we were reducing the current year budget with regard to supply accounts and purchase services accounts. Also, one of the things that I know Dr. Patton will share with you later on this evening is that we have identified some staffing changes that could possibly be made this year. And quite honestly, we need to make some changes because we need to make some pretty serious adjustments to our budget. All of the things we've talked about so far would improve the status of the operating fund this year by about 2.4 million. So still got a long way to go, but that's a good start, especially when you're addressing the challenge mid-year. Based upon kind of overall plan that we're going to share in a few minutes, shouldn't be a need to make any more reductions or changes this year other than what I've described, and then the more detailed staffing changes that Dr. Patton will share a little bit later. As we look into next year, this is where we need to make some of our more significant reductions. Some things we're looking at doing is improving the efficiency of our bus routes and reducing the number of routes, therefore saving money. We're going to talk to our principals and department heads to look at reducing supply budgets by 10%. We're going to look at reducing discretionary spending on professional development. Now, the PD 1% funds, you heard a presentation during the meeting last night. The PD 1% funds are required spending by the state of Missouri, and those PD 1% funds will not be reduced. They're unaffected, but the district has historically spent more than the PD 1% funds on professional development in the past, and will likely need to reduce those expenditures for next year. There are a series of staff reductions that Dr. Patton is going to share with you in more detail a little bit later. We would like to take a look at one practice. The district has paid employees for unused vacation days when they leave. We want to take a hard look at a couple of district policies and see if we might need to make some adjustments to that practice of paying out for unused vacation days. And then we also are looking at the medical insurance plan that we provide employees. The plan that we have is a very, very rich plan. And by rich, I mean the coverage is better than probably anybody you know has. It's just very, very rich plan, probably even richer than most of other school districts offer. So we're considering whether we might change the design to a plan that's a little more typical. Still continued to pay 100% of the premiums. Uh, but we currently pay $1,000 per month per employee for medical insurance, and that is very, very high. So we're looking at ideas to possibly control that expenditure a little bit. And then we're still looking at what kind of salary and wage increases might be appropriate for employees next year. Uh, it's most likely going to be a small increase, if anything, but it's going to be a challenge when we start looking at salaries and wages for next year. If we go on to the next slide. When Dr. Patton talks in a little more detail about staff reductions, in general, what I've built into the long-term projections, um, it may include a few things that Dr. Patton hasn't fully agreed to yet, but I'm being the bad guy in all of this, and then she's applying the voice of reason, which is it's a good way for us to work through this. But right now, the long range budget forecast I have assumes that we're going to reduce 5 administrative positions, 48 classified positions, and it looks like, and we considered changing 71 classified positions from full-time to part-time. That saves us a little bit on salary, but part-time positions, we do not provide insurance benefits to part-time. So there's a significant savings if that were to occur. And then in terms of certificated position, we have about 27 instructional support positions and 23 building level certified positions that we're taking a look at. Now, keep in mind, I said earlier, over the last 3 years, we added 200 positions. So this right here is what, 50, is about 103 positions. So keeping in mind, we added 200 over the last 3 years. It's kind of pulling back about 103 of those. And I really hope, I mean, I've been through this kind of thing before. We'd like to accomplish a lot of this through retirements and resignations. We have a significant number of retirements every year, significant number of resignations, and some of those retirements and resignations will be in positions that we can reduce. In other cases, um, if a position is reduced, the person currently filling that position might be able to apply for or transfer into another open position within the district as long as they're qualified for it. So by getting out ahead of this and knowing well in advance what our plans might be, we have a much better chance of keeping the employees who want to stay if they know well in advance and they're watching for other opportunities to transfer into should it become necessary. Okay, the next page. Even with all of the things I just described, we still have work to do even for next year. We really need to try to find an additional $2 million in expenditure reductions or revenue enhancements for next year. So we've done a lot of work, but we still have more to do. But assuming we can do all that, it will improve our operating fund, that annual deficit, by $11.1 million next year. And we should end next year with a balance of around 13 million, which is around 17.5%. So we're still above the 15% required by district policy, but you will notice we are still spending down. It is still a deficit budget. We're just not bleeding as profusely as we were before. So we'll still have work to do looking into the 26-27 school year and beyond. And on the next slide, which I believe is the last one, as we do look ahead to the year after next, we need to look at cutting yet another another $4 million in expenditures or finding revenue enhancements. There are a lot of ways to do that. We can look at budget cuts. We can look at staffing adjustments. I know there is some discussion about restructuring the district. And if a building is closed, that saves about 1.5 million. Another revenue enhancement option could be asking the voters to consider a tax levy increase. $1 on the levy would produce about $3.2 million. And if you could scroll down just a little further, Shay, right. It's worth noting that the total tax levy this year is $5.95 per $100 of assessed valuation. Just 2 years ago, it was $7.59. So the levy has dropped about $1.64 in the last 2 years. So it might be at least worth a discussion for late next year, whether asking the voters for an operating levy increase might be part of the long range plan. Just throwing all the various options out there. So in a nutshell, we just talked about where are we? How do we get here? Where are we going? And I know Dr. Patton's going to provide some additional detail later, but I would be happy to respond to any comments or questions that you have.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Veronica. So the question that I have has to do with the tax levy. As you know, it was approved that seniors can decide whether they want to have, take part of the tax freeze for seniors. And so we need to look at that and try to get a rough estimate of how many people are taking advantage of that. Then the other thing with regards to the tax rate is Riverview Gardens right now, when people look at their taxes that they have to pay, we are pretty close to almost $1,100 as far as taxes coming out to benefit our school district. So those are things that we're going to have to really have a serious conversation about. That's just my opinion.
Dr. Patton, didn't we come up with about 200 and what was it, close to 250,000 a year that we
I
are?
think it was,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr.
I
Coleman.
think it was about $250 a year that we're losing because of the seniors that were able to freeze their taxes. So it's come out to be about that amount.
Right. It was between $210,000 and $250,000 a year that we would lose with the frozen taxes. I also want to add that not only are we looking at the ways that Mr. Charles has shared, but we are also reaching out, trying to meet with elected officials, all of the mayors in the area and the elected officials to come up with a plan for bringing industry and business into our area. We are heavily reliant on state and federal funding as well as local taxes. And so Ishmael and I are trying to get a meeting planned the end of this month or possibly early next month with all the elected officials, because I think we all need to put our heads together and we need to figure out how can we court industry? How can we bring them in? How can we entice that? Because that's really where we're going to get the majority of our funding. We get 33% off of businesses and 19% off of the residential areas. And so if we can generate business, and I mean big business in our area, we could really start to generate some tax dollars that could help us operate our school district. So we will not only be, making budget reductions, talking to the community. I don't even know that we'll get to the tax levy piece, because I'd like to visit the idea of meeting with the elected officials to see what we can do to bring industry. When you look at other surrounding school districts, they have that. So we'll look at Hazelwood, Park, Floyd, they have that. Riverview Gardens doesn't. And so we really need to see how we can bring businesses forth. I also want Mr. Charles to go through the 3-year projection, because I want, so after questions are answered in this, Shay, if you'll bring up the attachment that's with that, and he can go over the 3-year projection, because I'd like the board and the community to see where we are going by 26, 27, or 28, 29, and beyond.
Yeah,
Other
that's that.
questions?
Yeah, I do have another
Go ahead.
question. So my question is, and I may be wrong and I'm not sure, but didn't St. Louis County have to put up tax money as far as this situation with the RAM thing? Were we entitled to any funds from that in St. Louis County?
I don't,
Ms. Morreal, I am not sure about that.
Okay.
From
I don't know
everything that
why.
I've read about it,
Mhm.
no, from everything that I read and know about it, it's St. Louis City.
Right.
They're making determinations on how to spend that funding. I haven't heard anything about any of that
In the
coming to
county.
St. Louis
Okay.
County. Mhm.
Okay.
Dr. Yvonne Elliott has her hand up with a question as well.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. My question is about, I emailed and asked about specific titles and positions, so that we would know, what is being affected. My question is, are we declaring a reduction in force, which will mean that people are going on some type of temporary leave? And then are we using a process of seniority? And what is the NEA's involvement in this discussion? Those are my
Yep.
questions.
Okay, so in address, so Dr. May, we will have that discussion. It will be more detailed, but this information affects certain positions and possible reductions, including positions held by one individual. And so that's going to be very sensitive information. And for that, I am going to request that we go into closed session for that discussion. In terms of NEA's involvement in the process, I meet with Ms. Valerie every month, and she is well aware of the budget reductions, as well as there are monthly meetings that is held with Mr. Ford HR, all of DLT members, well, a few DLT members, Ms. Nave, Ms. Liddell, and then so they are very well aware of the condition that we are in financially. In addition to that, I visited every single building in our district to share with staff members the issues of where we are financially. So we will continue to work with them in bringing this forth. But in terms of the names and the positions, I will request that we go into closed session because that's sensitive information, and it would be insensitive for people to find out on a public meeting.
and if I could
I
echo,
got a, I'm sorry.
if I could echo real quick, just follow up. And I've been through staffing reductions before. And when you start talking about how you're going to do it, I've heard words like, or phrases like reduction in force and words like seniority and so on. As far as I know, there's nothing in the current collective bargaining agreement with the RGNEA that prescribes any particular process or method. So that's one thing. Secondly, when we look at district policy, essentially the policy says that the administration and board can make changes whatever way is necessary and in the best interest of the district. I'm paraphrasing, but there's really no limitation on how it's done. So as a group, we truly can look at it and do what's in the best interest of the district and best interest of the kids.
So I'm not sure if I heard it answered. Are we declaring a reduction in force where they are going on some type of what the policy mentioned is unrequested leave of absence? Is that what we are declaring, or people just going to be terminated with no option to
No,
return
there
to
will
a
be a
vacant
reduction.
position? Okay.
In answer to your question, Dr. Yvonne Elliott, there will be a reduction in force and people will have the opportunity to return should the district financial condition improve.
Okay, and so then my question that I didn't hear an answer, we talked about that it doesn't define a process, but I was asking if seniority was being considered in this process.
No, not necessarily. We have a policy GCPA reduction in professional staff workforce, And that basically reads that the Board of Education may place as many teachers on unrequested leave of absence as may be necessary due to decrease in student enrollment, school district reorganization, or the financial condition of the school district. The Board of Education shall be the sole judge that one or more of these conditions exist. Because the school district exists for the students and the main objective of the Board of Education is to provide an education for district students and not to provide employment, the board will, through procedures carried out by administration, determine which employees can best serve the needs of the students.
So seniority is not considered, and we'll learn more about those specific positions. And I do understand that without names, positions can always be indicated. So if it was 2 positions at this school or the titles of the roles, yes, people may know who's associated with it, but I know that the titles can be mentioned.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am. Is my hand up? Is my hand up?
Yes, it is.
Yes, this is up,
Go
Ms.
ahead,
Lane.
Ms. Blaine.
Okay. I feel like the wind has just been knocked out of me. This is an awful lot of financial information for us to digest, I believe, right now. There's so many questions before I even try to process the weed part. I understand very clearly your presentation, Mr. Charles, was factual to the point, and I get it. You all been working with this for a lot longer than, or more intimately than we have. But just as a citizen in this community and a board member, this stuff is it's just astounding to me. So the few financial questions I have are we can't control. I understand the desire, superintendent, for increased revenue here in our communities, but that is not something that we can control right now, especially in the short term. I think that goes through long-term planning, which we've all kind of tried to do that in the last just 3 years that I've been on this board, but there's been talk about it anyway. How we got here is still, I'm disturbed by that because it's almost like, why didn't anybody know that this is why we got to this? There were should have been more than one eyes looking on this. And I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned about repercussions and consequences, of which I see apparently there are none. So we just kind of take it on the chin, and now we got to clean up the mess that was made. And I know it isn't changing the reality, but I just don't think it's fair. And I want to say that. I want to know what plan the district has to communicate this with the community, because this is major. And we're already hearing different theories of how comes and wherefores. I don't know how deep you go into the explanations. I don't know. I don't know, but I'd like to know, do we have a plan to communicate this to our stakeholders? Because we are managing taxpayer dollars, and there should be someone accountable for it. There just should. And some explanation. So
Ms. Lane, go ahead.
Just summarize. I'm going to say that these are also parts of this picture, I believe, that needs some attention, and it needs to be well thought out and communicated. And then the names and who's involved, because I am not a financial person. I think just the little stuff that I've seen, I think it should be more than 5 administrative positions, just from the little I know. I know that there should just be more than that. I just think that we need to do things expeditiously and as independently as we can. Thank you.
Ms. Williams, your hand is up.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to comment on Ms. Lane's question, how could this happen? And I will say, being a former employee of the district, there were people who knew that we would end up here, myself being one, based on the expenditures and the salaries and how many positions were being added. But there was, in my opinion, an attitude of this is what we want, so this is what we're going to do. And so here we are. And I'm just looking forward to the district being able to come up with a plan that will help resolve this issue.
So we are working hard to come up with a plan to resolve this issue. Mr. Charles talked about some budget reductions over the next 10 years, looking for enhancements to bring in money, considering a tax levy, also considering meeting with, trying to meet with area elected officials to see how we can generate revenue into our district. And so we are, in terms of when we will be communicating this, we have been communicating this at board meetings. Ms. Lane, we will continue to communicate it in public meetings. As part of the meetings when we talked about the demographic study, I talked about having to redo our budget and having budget concerns in those meetings, and I will continue to have that conversation, and we'll continue to talk to the community. We will also, want their opinion and get them involved in this process. As I've met with all of our schools throughout our district, they've had some great ideas on how we can generate funding from grant writing to benefactors that would sometimes donate to school districts to support that. And so we are looking at all ways that we can bring in funding for this district to keep it solvent and to address the budget concerns that we are having.
Well, just a second, Ms. Titsworth. Dr. Avant Elliott, your hand is up.
Yes, my last inquiry, I'm not sure if I heard this being stated, but even with the staffing adjustment plan, are we saying that this would take place immediately for the next school year? I'm not sure if I heard that or understood that piece of the process. So, because I guess it's a lot of things that's tentative. So it's not listing out a timeline to prioritize what needs to happen first in order for us to address this. So I'm just trying to get clarification on if there is a reduction in force declared, are we doing it immediately, and that impact the individuals who will be recommended for that reduction.
Mr. Charles, do you want to talk about what you stated about some of the reductions will occur this year and some will occur next year, and then there'll still be a need in the third year to do reductions as well?
Right, yeah. I guess a general response to your question is the sooner we can make reductions, the better, because we're obviously spending money faster than we're bringing it in. And every day that goes by, is just another day that we spent more than we brought in. So the sooner we can begin to do some of this, the better. We have already made some reductions to supply accounts, purchase services accounts, and we are considering, I know Dr. Patton's going to share some more details with you a little bit later about some specific staffing changes that could be made this year to begin to reduce expenditures. But then the bulk of the things that were referenced in my presentation would occur for next school year. And then we would need to make additional reductions the year after that to get us back to the point where we have 15% operating fund balance and a balanced budget. That's how we get there. And we, again, once we can speak to specific positions and so on a little bit later, we can get into a little more detail.
And we will also put together a comprehensive plan looking at everything, and we will bring that forth to the board as well.
Ms. Titsworth, your
I
hand
just want
is
to,
up.
I wasn't finished. I'm almost. I just wanted to make a recommendation just out of the humanity of this situation and impact on people's livelihood. If it was possible for HR to reach out to other districts to facilitate some type of recruitment effort for those individuals, with it being this time of the school year, to support them financially, just out of consideration, because they do have vacancies that they may need to be filled. And for somebody, they might have had a position for a long time. They might not have done an updated resume and all these different things. But, you know, it would be nice to, just as a gesture of humanity, to facilitate a effective transition for them in the event that, you know, they would be devastated with the news.
Duly noted, Dr. May. That is exactly one of the reasons why we are bringing this forth now, after, because we are fully aware this is recruitment season and we want to support everyone into getting employment, everyone that will be affected. So you are absolutely right. That is the humanity of it. And so that's why we are doing it, so that we can ensure that all of our positions, either we find, you know, if they're tenure positions, we find positions within vacancies within our own district, and then, you know, also being recruited to other districts. So Mr. Ford made note of that, and we will make sure that we support that effort.
Ms. Titsworth, your hand was up. You know what, Ms. Titsworth, when you signed into the meeting, when you got to the screen that said, use audio, use computer audio, did you click that? When you logged into Zoom and it says use
Join with computer audio.
Join with computer audio. You remember seeing that little blue line? Did you click that?
Shay, can you call her and see if we can let her be heard that way?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else while we're waiting that has the question? Ms. Navis, your hand up?
I have my hand up too.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ms. Nay.
No,
ma'am, Dr. Coleman. I was just pointing at Ms. Morrow Real. I am not speaking.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Mario.
The question that I have has to do with where the problem occurred in the beginning, and that is in the financial department. So apparently, if what I'm hearing is this has been something that's been ongoing. So in your discussion, can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. In your discussion with the staff of the finance department, were you able to ascertain who did not understand their position or understand how to make sure that this was, every I was dotted and every T was crossed? I know initially that it falls on the shoulders of our ex CFO officer, but with this being something that is ongoing.
One thing that I think we're forgetting is that this problem is not just in Riverview Gardens. Other school districts are experiencing the same problem. As you know, SSD was actually paying people to leave because of it was all about the ESSER funding. And ESSER funding should have never been used to pay salaries, because you can't sustain that with money that's going to go away. So if I have this lump sum of money, let's say I got $5 million every year for the next 3 years, and I'm paying salaries out of that. Now, when that 3 years is up and I don't have that $5 million, but I still got $5 million worth of salaries that I'm paying. and you can't sustain that because you don't have the income to sustain it. That's that's where the problem lies, or that's how we got here in this place, was that the hiring of the 200 people, we used ESSER funding to pay salaries, and that's what should not have happened.
So I understand what you're saying, but my question is that somebody evidently did, and I know that we had those funds, but some kind of way or another, I heard him using the words like just errors. And so my concern is these people are still in the finance department. What are we doing to make sure that they understand for the future coming up, the best way do they understand what it is that they're responsible for? Is there additional training needed or what have you?
Yeah, I have some pretty firm opinions of
Mhm,
that. Obviously, I wasn't present
mhm.
prior to August, but I have some pretty firm opinions, and I can speak to specific individuals, but that would be a better discussion for closed session,
Okay.
with all due respect.
Okay. Because I think we need to have that. You know what I'm saying? Because it could be somebody that really just doesn't understand. It could be somebody holding a grudge or whatever that don't really care. We've experienced that in the past, So I just want to make sure that the people that are going to be handling our finances, you know, or have a thorough understanding of what their role is and what they're supposed to do. Because if we don't give them training, if we don't figure out where the misunderstanding is coming from, where these errors are coming from, um, then that's going to be problematic. And it seems strange to me that we're coming up with all these errors, but when we had the audit done, this stuff wasn't caught, unless it was a different type of audit. I don't really know.
Yes,
That's
it's a
my
different type of audit. Yeah,
okay.
the audit just says, did you use the correct accounting practices?
Okay.
Right,
It really doesn't speak to how,
right.
doesn't speak to the quality of your budgeting and
Okay.
planning. Yeah.
Okay. And then my last
Yeah,
part
and
to my
we,
okay, my last part to my question is this. Um, has any consideration been given to the fact that would it be more inexpensive to outsource some things?
mhm. Yeah, so Ms. Marwell, we are looking at outsourcing some of our some duties within our district. We are looking at outsourcing. Outsourcing would allow us not to have to pay, benefits as well as retirement, things like that. So we are considering that. As a matter of fact, I've talked with several DLT members about outsourcing some things. And also, I'll be honest with you, we are looking at also some of the contracts that we have and how we can make better use of the funding in losing those contracts. So we are considering every avenue, including contracts and outsourcing. So yes, ma'am, we are. I do want to agree with Dr. Coleman as well. The ESSER funding was both a blessing and a curse. It really was. We had the money and we utilized it for hiring positions, and we, thinking about what was going to happen after those ESSER fundings were gone. And so here we are, and now we have to make adjustments to account for that. So I agree with you, and I equally agree that you can almost contact any district and they will tell you they're having the same issue just across. Any of our school districts that use the ESSER funding to hire positions are standing in the same place. Some are in terms of finances look worse than ours, some not as bad. But she's absolutely right. The ESSER funding, while it was supportive, long-term thoughts about how it was utilized.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Coleman, Ms. Williams, and Dr. May's hands are up.
Ms. Williams?
Ms. Tisworth was still waiting to make her comment.
Oh, I'm sorry,
okay.
Ms. Tisworth, we're ready to hear from you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was wondering, with these cuts that we're making or whatever we call it.
Wait, we lost you. We can't hear you again.
I'm on with Shay.
Okay, there you go.
Can you hear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
With these cuts that we're making, or what have you, before we decide who we let go, have we looked into their performance and evaluation? You know, because somebody could be here 100 years and haven't performed. It should be let go.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. So, Ms. Tisworth, we looked at the first thing we looked at were evaluations. Then we looked at skill set, and then we looked at what other things they are doing in our district to support students. So there was a criteria that was applied when we looked at positions, and we are still in that process actually of looking at positions and looking at the skill sets first. All of their, last 3 or 4 years of their evaluations, their skill set, as well as their contribution in terms of building support with students within our district.
All right.
Ms. Williams?
Okay, so I wanted to go back to the comment about the ESSER funds. And we all knew about the ESSER funds and the intent of the ESSER funds. And I do believe that that's only a piece of the problem that we're facing now. We all knew that they would go away. We all knew how much we had, but the truth of the matter is, from where I sat as an employee in the district, very close to staffing, being the former assistant superintendent of human resources, it was just an attitude of, we were already behind as a district in salaries, and we knew that our salaries were not competitive to other districts. So there was an effort to try and make the district more competitive. We did a compensation study. We looked at ways to attract and attain people to come to our district. However, in doing that, there was just a better way to do it. And it's not that people didn't deserve salary increases, because they did, but some of the ways that it was gone about giving the increases and the amounts that were given it was obvious that the district would not be able to sustain those increases long term. So it was just a quick fix is what I considered it to be, to try and attract and retain people and to make people happy. But there were some of us who knew and who said it, that we could not sustain this long term, but it just fell on deaf ears. And so here we are now trying to figure it out. So it's not just a happenstance. Yes, other districts are dealing with budget issues due to ESSER money, but in our case, that wasn't the only issue. It was just judgment, a matter of those making decisions to pay certain salaries. We did a compensation study to try and figure out where we could pay people, where they should belong on the salary scale. And sometimes it was ignored because there were people who wanted people to have higher salaries. And so here we are.
Yeah, and we could probably do the woulda, shoulda, coulda all night.
And that's not what I'm trying to do, Dr.
Now, what the problem, the question now is, what do we do now?
Issue. I agree, it's what we do now, but I want to not, because when we say things, that's what's out there for people to hear. I just want to give another part of the story. It's not just the ESSER funds.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
My hand is raised.
I thought my hand was raised. Is it Dr. Coleman?
No, it was not.
Okay, I'll raise it.
I wanted to ask if, first of all, from a point of order and protocol, we should not be entering into debate with any of the Board of Aldermen with their comments. But I wanted to ask, with the newest hires that might have been supported by the funds, do we know who they are, and has a last in, first out consideration been considered? And also sharing staff. I think I've spoke before about legislation that speaks to superintendents being shared amongst multiple districts, but just possibly having conversations with other districts about utilizing their human resources as a supplement and figuring out a plan for that. I was just wondering, you know, how much we have done with identifying those people who might have been funded by that money, and to use that last in, first out approach.
And so, Dr. May, we do know who, in terms of hiring when they came in, in terms of that order, we looked at the 3 criteria. We did follow our policy, and we are still in reviewing those. I want to make that very clear. We're still reviewing everything in terms of the people who are going to lose their position. So in instances where we have a lot of people in a certain title, we looked at everybody, and we're looking at their evaluation, their skill set, as well as their support of students within our district. We're doing this and making sure we're following our policy, GCPA. And that policy doesn't require that we do a last in, first out approach. It does require that we do what's best for the district. And so that is the approach that we're taking. But I do want to make it very clear, we're still looking at those positions. We haven't given names to some of them, and others we have given names to. And so again, that will be preferable to discuss that in closed session, because it will be easily identifiable with some of the positions. So, but yes, that is the approach that was taken.
So, given the positions that are currently being held by subs, you wouldn't need any, I guess, continuing subs if this plan is implemented with filling those positions with the qualified people who are certified. We shouldn't need any full-time subs, continuous subs, right?
Well, we have a number of sub positions that are still open. I think in the past, I think we've done very well. I think a year or two ago, we had over 100. We are down to 54 positions. So certainly we will, those people who will lose their current position will be offered. If they're a tenured employee, they will be offered positions that are open within our district, as well as some that may become available by resignations or retirement.
Okay, so right now we have how many positions that are not filled by staff? What was the total?
Mr. Ford, would you speak to that for us, please?
So right now we have 54 certified positions that are available. In terms of teaching positions, Dr. Patton already said that we would look at certification. We'll look at those tenured people, and we'll also look at those other people that we need to reassign based off their certification and qualifications. So we will do that. And then we have about 20 total support staff positions that are available.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Lane? You're muted. Ms. Lane? Ms. Lane, you're muted. You had a comment?
Moved it. I'll unmute. Hold on.
Okay, there you
You're
are.
unmuted now.
You're out. You're good. You're good.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I can bear. Something has happened because the volume just went down. I asked a question. I didn't hear what Avant Elliott said, but that's really neither here nor there. My
She
question
mentioned it in the
is,
chat. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what did I not hear?
Monica put something in the chat for you.
Oh, okay. All right. RIF. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's a policy?
That's a reduction
Okay,
in
so
force,
here's my
Ms.
question. You know, we're not going through all this. Superintendent, do you
Yes,
and Mr. Charles and whoever else is are spearheading this I don't know, progression, transition, however way we want to describe it.
yes, ma'am.
Are there just, do you have priorities? Like, what's the first thing we should do? What's the second thing we should do? And I don't know if this is a kind of situation that actually that applies to. I just like to break things down into workable categories. Let's do this, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's A. Letter B, 1, 2, 3, 4. Have you guys are you all doing it that way? Because at the end of the
Yes,
day,
ma'am.
I appreciate you
Mhm.
all the work you all doing and sharing this stuff with us, but this is your responsibility, and it's unfortunate that it's all falling on your shoulders, but this is your all's responsibility. I'm not in HR. I'm not going to try to interject. I'm listening and I'm learning about, how people are, how you determine how you're going to keep staff and stuff like that. But at this point, I'm going to have to trust that you know more than I do. Not that I have to trust it, I already know. So I'm asking, do you all have, we're going to do this, and let's get the process going. But I'm going to say again, what's being communicated. And see, we also have now the outside influence of another, what do they call it? Another choice, which I take exception with that term, but it's almost like we're down, so let's kick them while they're down, and I don't like that. So all of those things are in play. We have to be strategic on how we communicate it to the community and clear on what we say, because they'll take one thing and run with it. And I don't think I've shared with you the one thing they took. They already took that we've already decided that we're going to close Danforth. And nobody
Yeah,
has even done that.
no, we
So
haven't. And I've made that very clear, Ms. Lane, that the board has not made any decision in every meeting that I've been in. And I will continue to say that in all communications. In terms of a plan that we are putting together, we do have a plan that we are putting together. Mr. Charles kind of shared some of it. So the first thing we look at is what can we do so that we don't affect our students? And so we are doing our best to make sure that we continue to give an effective education within our school district. And so that's the very first thing. We try to make reductions where the students will be least affected. And so that's where we started with this process. That's we came up with a list of positions that we believe would least affect our students, right? And so there is a plan. And then, as Mr. Charles stated, we're looking at our benefits. Can we get a better benefits package? We are currently spending, he said 1,000, but it's actually 1,007, $1,007 per employee. And then, after we met with our health insurance company and we reached out to them to try to get a better deal on that, and we were unable to because we are held at the top tier because we have employees who draw heavily on it, and because of that, we sit at the top tier of our health benefit, right? So what can we do there? Can we offer a different plan? And that's what we are looking. That's what we are meeting. That plan will actually come during our next board meeting on the 25th. We'll talk about health insurance. We'll talk about some positions where we may need to increase the hourly rate so that we can get rid of some of our contracts that we're spending millions of dollars on. So we're looking at all of that. And so, yes, there is a plan. We are doing this in the most expeditious way, but most respectful way possible, so that we make sure that we're respecting our employees and we're giving them the opportunity to be picked up, which is why we started with some reductions, because we understand that this is recruitment season and we want to make sure we can get them recruited to other districts. So we are not just flying by the seat of our pants. Mr. Charles and I have been head to head along with Travis Ford, Ms. Nays, Ms. Liddell. Everybody has been a part of this discussion, and they're making reductions within their own departments. And so we've been working on this as a team, and we will continue to work, and this is one piece of a plan. We will bring the other piece forward during our meeting on the 25th. And then we will continue to communicate this. I've been putting it in, as I said before, the demographic study information that I've been sharing about, our budget, having to do a revised budget and having budget concerns. And so I will continue to tell this story. And Mr. Charles has, we've been bringing this to the board, I think, as he said, in November, and then again in, I think it was January. And so we will continue to tell this story. We will continue to get this story out, and we will continue to start to make adjustments to it, because we have the problem. Now we have to solve the problem. And we are working to do that. There is no magic pill to it. It is going to take time. It's going to take a lot of research to find out. We met with CSC Trust on our insurance maybe a couple of weeks ago. We were doing our best to get that reduced. We even went out to the market, had somebody go out to the market, and we were told basically that we could not get a better rate than what we have. And by the way, health insurance would increase by 12% next year and 15% the following year. So we definitely have to make hard decisions in this district to keep this district moving forward. And as difficult as this is, we are doing our best to build a solid plan that we are bringing forth to the board for their input, as well as other pieces that will come forth over the next month or so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we want to go into looking at the projections? Because I really wanted Mr. Charles to give, to show the board where we will be in 3 or 4 years. However, we can move into, I would request moving into closed session to really look at some of the positions that we will be talking about. I'm sorry, Ms. Titsworth, I think I saw your hand. Did you have your hand up?
That was mine. I had lowered it after you mentioned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to make a final remark because I know that some concerns have been mentioned about the finance department, but everybody is a designee of a superintendent, so we have to always keep that in mind, and we are fiscally responsible as a board. So those are the two entities that have to look at finances more closely.
All right, so Shay, will you pull up the 3-year projection just to make sure that we have a clear picture of where we're going? It was one of the attachments.
It was a PDF.
Is this the
Right.
correct document?
That is the correct one.
I'll
And
make
if you
it
could
bigger. Just give me a
make it
second.
bigger and particularly go down toward the bottom a little bit. Yeah, let's go to the bottom. Okay, yeah, that's good enough. Yeah, that's good. So this particular page it's similar to what you have seen in some of the budget information I've been sharing with you. I know you can't see the header at the top of these, but if I'll just read this. If we go from left to right, look at that very bottom row of numbers. On the far left, at the end of the 22-23 school year, there was a little over $31 million and a 45% fund balance in the operating fund. The next column over, still 31 million at the end of last year with a 37% fund balance. When you look at that first blue column, the original budget that was presented to you last June said that we would end the year still at about $31 million and a 40% fund balance in the operating fund. Then we realized in about August, September that there were some errors in that budget. The second blue column is, yeah, that one right there. We brought a budget revision to you in October, said more realistically that operating fund's going to end up about 16 million, which is about an 18.9, almost 19% fund balance. The next column was our budget revision from January, still around a $16 million operating fund balance anticipated, still around 18.5% of operating fund balance anticipated. With all of the possible changes we talked about for this year, if we were to implement those, it would improve our standing a bit. It's that last blue column shows that our operating fund balance would end a little stronger at a little over 19 million, which is about a 22.15%. And if we were to follow through with that long list of changes that were put up for consideration, if we were to do all that next year, we'd end next year with about a 12.9, roughly $13 million balance, with about a 17.5%. But if we stop there, remember I said we need to do more, but if we didn't, if we stopped there, we'd continue to bleed until year after next, operating fund balance is down to 4 million, which is a 5.79%. And then the year after that, we'd run out of money. We go negative again. So as uncomfortable and as complex and significant as all of this is, I wanted you to see this to demonstrate how important the long range projections are. This is what was not happening in the past. I think Ms. Williams mentioned that people were making decisions on, we need to do this now, we need to do this now. But it seems like, again, I wasn't there, but it seems like not enough attention was paid to what happens the year after that and the year after that. How do we sustain it? And a lot of the board members, you've referenced that. These numbers show that even with the significant changes we talked about for this year, and even more significant changes next year, there'll still be more work to do even after that. So we wanted you to see this to kind of give you a feel for where we stand before we go into some more greater detail in the closed session.
President
Okay, and
Godspeed.
Okay, and due to the nature of the next part of the meeting, it will be sensitive information, and I will make a request of the board president that we move into closed session.
We will be going into closed session to discuss the pending reduction in force, so we can discuss the individual performance and merit of individuals who may be retained or reduced in force. Accordingly, I move to transition to closed session under section 610-021, numbers 3, 13, and 14.
So move.
Wait a second.
Second. Veronica Marva, real second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Dr. Vardelli and second by Ms. Maharia to move into closed session. Roll call vote, Shay.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Tisworth, Ms. Lang, Dr.
Yes.
Von Elliott,
Yes.
Ms. Morrill,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
and Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
So I will send you all a link to
Hang up.
no,
Okay.
give me 1 second. It's not there. That's okay.
So district
Dr. Patton,
leadership,
should we go ahead and remove ourselves?
yes, I was going to say district
Should we go
leadership
ahead and
team
remove
will,
ourselves?
yes, can you hear me? Shay, can you all hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
I
so
could hear.
the people that will remain, the district leadership team that will remain in the meeting will be Mr. Ford and Mr. Charles and myself.
If we
The rest
remain,
Thank
of,
you. Have a good evening.
if we
yeah.
remain on this link, Doc, I believe
Well,
it'll
she'll
be
give us a
shown.
link. Yeah,
Okay.
she'll give us a link, but I'm just letting everyone know that.
I don't see it. Okay. Can you help me?
Mute Shay.
That's okay. Ishmael, I was speaking to him because we had went through this several times where we would have a breakout room and I was made to be the host, but I do not have those as options on, unfortunately. So what we're going to have to do is stop the recording at this point. Okay, so the recording has been stopped and we're going to also end our live streaming as well. Is that correct, Ishmael?
Yes. I think you are going to have to do that.